Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran, and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. And I have with me a very special guest, Ambassador DB Venkatesh Varma, who is India's ambassador to Russia. Ambassador Varma, welcome to DD India.
Well, Mr. Ramachandran, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the strategic partnership between India and Russia.
Indeed. Welcome, Ambassador Varma. Now, just a quick word about my guest for the benefit of viewers who might be tuning in from around the world. Ambassador Varma is a career diplomat. He's in the Indian Foreign Service, and he presented his credentials to the Russian president in September 2018. Now, he's spent many years in the Indian Foreign Service. He was ambassador to Spain. He was also handling the disarmament affairs in the Indian Foreign Ministry. In fact, he was ambassador to the Conference on Disarmament as well. And by the way, he's the first recipient of the S.K. Singh Award of Excellence in the Indian Foreign Service in the year 2010 for his contribution to the negotiations of the Civil Nuclear Initiative. Ambassador Varma, welcome once again to DD India. Let's now talk a bit, Ambassador Varma, about the 20th anniversary of the India-Russia partnership. Now, that was on the 3rd of October this year. Now, how do you look at the evolution of the two-decade-long relationship, starting with the strategic partnership in the year 2000 and graduating now to the special and privileged strategic partnership? Would you like to give our viewers an overview of the relationship over the last 2 decades?
This month, 20 years ago, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and President Vladimir Putin signed the Declaration on Strategic Partnership. In 2010, this was upgraded further to a special and privileged strategic partnership.
Right.
This is a partnership in its truest sense, special and privileged. It is strategic because it deals with core issues and it deals with long-term interests of both countries.
Absolutely. Let's now talk a bit, Ambassador Varma, if you will, about the specific areas of cooperation. We can discuss about political ties, trade and investment, defense and security, energy, and so on and so forth. Let's start with the state of play in defense cooperation. How would you describe the current relationship as far as defense goes? And how do you see the role of the Russian manufacturers in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's flagship enterprise, Make in India?
Well, indeed. Prime Minister Modi enjoys excellent personal relations with President Putin. They have met 22 times since 2014. They have spoken 4 times this year on telephone. President Putin greeted Prime Minister Modi on his birthday. Prime Minister reciprocated this gesture and congratulated President Putin on his birthday on the 7th of October. So in taking forward this strategic partnership, the relationship between our 2 leaders is indeed a great asset. In fact, I think it is the most important asset in this very complex world when we have leaders of both countries taking care of the relationship in a long-term perspective. I think that gives a certain amount of stability and predictability that would not be otherwise available. India and Russia enjoy a number of pillars which have been traditional pillars, defense being one of them. You may recall that in 1962, when we had a border problem with China, and there were Mi-4 helicopters of Soviet origin, which were transporting our troops to Ladakh. Many years later, many decades later, as today we face a similar situation of protecting our interests and taking forward and supporting our troops. A lot of Russian origin equipment is being deployed there. Prime Minister Modi has emphasized that this old traditional relationship has to be modernized and diversified. And one area of diversification is in the area of defense and defense production. More than 60 to 70% of India's armed forces draw their equipment from Russia. We have signed an agreement henceforth, that spare parts for Russian origin equipment will be manufactured in India. One of the flagship programs for Make in India in the defense sector is the agreement between the two countries for the manufacture of the Kalashnikov AK-203, which is one of the most modern assault rifles in the world, that will be manufactured in Korba in UP as part of a Make in India program. Make in India program will go forward with the active support and participation of the Russian defense industry. And this has been one of the main items of cooperation and the priorities for the future.
And talking about defense ties, Ambassador Varma, now there are some media reports in Russia which say that both countries, Russia and India, could launch a new BrahMos missile by 2024, and that the same missile could be shared with third countries, and also that Russia might not be inclined to have a defense relationship with other countries in India's neighborhood. So in that context, what's next on the agenda, so to speak, of the next big idea in India-Russia defense and security cooperation specifically?
Well, as the historic records shows, Russia has refrained from supplying combat equipment to one of our neighbors, and that is a very positive element in our relationship. With respect to BrahMos, as you would recall, it is one of the most successful joint ventures in our bilateral relationship. Mm-hmm. It was launched with the blessings of our former president, Dr. Kalam, who was the guiding spirit of the BrahMos program. Today, the BrahMos program has evolved into one of the best cruise missile programs in the world. This has been accepted by all our three services. And naturally, there's great interest from third countries to import the BrahMos missile that is produced as a result of a joint venture that is established in India. Now, joint ventures is the way to move forward. There is great interest in part of Russian defense industry to cooperate with the defense industry in India, both in the private sector and in the public sector, to go forward and establish joint ventures for the future. We expect joint ventures not only to be established for the manufacture of spare parts, but for full weapon systems. And the defense production procedures that were announced just a few weeks ago provide great opportunity for Russian industry. And we see a lot of enthusiasm emerging from the Russian defense industry to come and partner with India, a traditional partner, but a partner with a growing technological capability, a very positive investment environment, as well as a great opportunity to explore third country markets. The BrahMos missile will be taken forward for third country exports, consistent with our interests, our political interests, our security interests, and of course, our export control procedures.
Ambassador Varma, another pillar of the defense ties is energy. Now, would you like to share with our viewers and give them a sense of where things stand today insofar as cooperation hydrocarbons goes, cooperation on the civil nuclear side of the relationship, and also of late we've seen India taken interest in Russia's Far East as well?
Indeed. Many of your viewers would recall that it was with Soviet assistance that the first exploration projects in India yielded positive results in our oil and gas sector. Our ONGC, our public sector enterprises in the energy sector have long-standing relations with Russia. Similarly, we have long-standing relations in terms of investments in the Russian energy sector. Sakhalin-1 investment, which was made in the early 2000s, has today yielded more benefits than any other foreign investment made by India globally. So that is an example of how India-Russia relations can yield extremely good benefits for our country's interests. Subsequently, India has invested more than $13 billion in the Russian energy industry, be it Sakhalin-1, be it in Vankor, be it in Tas Yasser Yak, Imperial Energy, and in other sectors. Today, GAIL has established a long-term relationship with Gazprom for supply for LNG. Similarly, Rosneft has a long-time supply relationship with our Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. We are looking for Russian participation in our energy sector, domestic gas sector, including the use of LNG for transportation. As we move forward within the next decade, more and more of our cars and trucks in India will run on LNG. There is great interest in Russia with our experience with CNG. As you know, one of the most successful ventures in Delhi has been the conversion of public transport into CNG, and there's great interest in Russia from learning the experience that India has in this sector. Similarly, in terms of coking coal, we see our steel industry looking for predictable, long-term, commercially competitive supply arrangements, and we are presently working on that. The nuclear sector is again very important. We should remember that Russia reached out to us to support India at a time when there were severe nuclear restrictions applicable to India. This was several decades ago. And the Kudankulam project was conceived at a time of great difficulty for India. But since then, much has moved, much has changed for India, for the India-Russia relationship, and as well as in the international standing of India in the international system. India and Russia are also engaging in cooperating in the Rupur nuclear power plant project in Bangladesh. And there is great interest on the part of our friends from Bangladesh to involve India in a more extended way in cooperation with Russia, taking forward our cooperation. Similarly, there's such interest from the Gulf, from Central Asia, and from Africa. We see a lot of cooperation that is possible in mutual investments in the Russian Arctic. As you know, we are already invested in Vankor. There is great interest in the Eastern Cluster. The Eastern Cluster is a project of oil and gas in the Russian Arctic, which will take forward, which will keep Russia as one of the largest energy producers well into the next century. With three major clusters of energy producers. One is in the Gulf area, the second is Russia, the third is the United States. And for our energy security, India is keen that we cooperate and engage with all three. And I'm very happy to inform you that our progress with Russia is very, very encouraging. As you recall, Prime Minister Modi attended as chief guest for the Eastern Economic Forum meeting in September of last year, when he announced that India would be actively engaged with the Russian Far East. In fact, he announced a new policy called the Act Far East policy, part of which involves our interest and engagement with Russia, not just with the Russian Far East, but the Arctic. We envisage our energy bridge, not just from Vladivostok, but from Yamal to Vladivostok, and from Vladivostok to Chennai to our eastern seaboards. These are moving forward, and I am very confident that Russia will continue to be a major partner for us in the energy sector in the decades to come.
Indeed. Ambassador Varma, how is the cooperation in the area of space coming along, for instance? Russia, for instance, is also training the Indian astronauts for the Gaganyaan mission as well.
Well, space is one area of cooperation that excites both young and old, across the world, and our people in India and Russia are no exception. There are those of us who remember that our first two satellites, Aryabhat and Bhaskara, were launched on top of Soviet satellites. Rakesh Sharma, who's still a hero for several of our people, was launched on a Soviet space launch vehicle. These are the old bonds of friendship that are blossoming into new frontiers of cooperation. In 2018, during Prime Minister's visit, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Russia for cooperation in the field of human space exploration. As part of that, I'm happy to report that there are 4 smart, professional Indian Air Force officers presently undergoing training in the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center outside Moscow. They have been here throughout this year, and despite the COVID pandemic, their training program has progressed unimpeded. I had an opportunity to meet them. Very impressive set of pilots. I'm sure they will do our country proud. They have been very highly assessed by the Russian instructors, who are very, very impressed by their dedication and professionalism. They complete their training in Russia in March 2021 and will continue their further training in India as we move forward for the launch of the Gaganyaan manned space, human space program during the year of our 75th anniversary of our independence, as had been announced by our Prime Minister.
Let's talk a bit now, Ambassador Varma, if you will, about trade and investment ties, especially science and technology. And also in the post-COVID world, is there scope for collaboration between Moscow and New Delhi on the post-COVID situation, especially in the area of vaccine, for instance?
Well, our economic relations have been doing well, relatively well. We had a considerable improvement in our trade exchanges last year. We reached about $10.5 billion. There's been some excellent growth areas. Unfortunately, these growth areas took a hit this year, but we are no exception to the downturn in global trade that has happened across the board. But we hope to have a rebound in our relations in 2021. The new areas of cooperation include agro-industry, pharma. India has proven to the world that the pharmaceutical sector is one of our greatest strengths. There is great interest in Russia to cooperate with the Indian pharma industry to take this forward. Cyber, artificial intelligence, moving forward is another area of great interest. There is great interest in Russia that India is well positioned to be one of the cyber digital superpowers in the coming decade. We have the cheapest digital costs anywhere in the world. We have immense talent. Our unicorns are deeply inventive. Similarly, in Russia, though the scale is much smaller, we have equally good talent. So the marriage between Russia and India in the cyber and the digital sector will yield tremendous results. During the COVID pandemic, I think the true strengths of both countries have come to the fore. Despite the COVID pandemic restrictions, India supplied over 80 tons of medical supplies and equipment to Russia. This was greatly appreciated by the Russian people. In fact, the Kremlin issued a special statement appreciating Prime Minister Modi's initiative to supply hydroxychloroquine at a time when there's great shortage across the world. Both India and Russia have announced, their leaders have announced that their production of vaccines in India, our own vaccines, the vaccines that we produce along with foreign partners, is not just for our own consumption. but for the betterment of humanity. That being the case, I think we see the partnership between India and Russia as one of our most relevant partnership as we go forward and take on the challenge, continuing challenge posed by the COVID pandemic the world over.
Now, Ambassador Varma, India and Russia also cooperate and collaborate on regional and global issues as well. In that context, in the context of multilateral cooperation, how do you look at India-Russia ties, say in the Russia-India-China trilateral format, or the Russia-Iran-India, or the Russia-Iran-China trilateral at the same time? And also the BRICS, India and Russia within the BRICS family, so to speak, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, as well as in the United Nations.
Well, this year and the coming 2 years will be very important for India's engagement on the multilateral stage for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this year, our good friend Russia has been the chair of the SCO and the BRICS formats, and despite the COVID pandemic, meetings at the foreign ministers level and other ministerial levels have taken place. As a special gesture, our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, and our Raksha Mantri, Shri Rajnath Singh, visited Russia despite the COVID complications to attend the meetings that had been organized by Russia as the host of the SCO, as the chair of the SCO. Now, this is, I think, an indication of the very special regard that India holds with respect to the chairmanship of Russia during the COVID, during the chairmanship of the SCO. We look forward to the summit meetings of the SCO and the BRICS in November. These will take place through video conference, given the restrictions still applicable because of the COVID pandemic. Our Prime Minister will be participating in the SCO summit on video conference on 10th November. On 17th November, the BRICS summit will take place. India will be hosting the meeting of heads of government towards the end of November. And Russia has been hugely supportive of our priorities that we wish to take forward in the context of the meeting of heads of government, and that will take place in Delhi, either physically or through video conference. And that said, next year, India will be holding the chair of the RIC. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar visited Russia for the SCO meeting, but on the sidelines, we had a meeting of the RIC foreign ministers. The baton was handed over by Foreign Minister Lavrov to Dr. Jaishankar. We will be taking this forward next year. Similarly, India will be the chair of the BRICS next year. In 2022, we will also be holding the chair of the G20. From January next year, India will be joining other members of the Security Council for a 2-year tenure on the Council. In all these forums, which are very relevant in this very complex and disturbed world, our partnership with Russia on global priorities is absolutely critical. The Russian side is hugely positive on India's role. Russia continues to support India's permanent membership of the Security Council. There is absolutely no change in Russia's position. So going forward, I think there are a number of issues on which Russia and India cooperate, and these platforms will indeed act as a multiplier factor for further deepening our engagement on regional and global issues.
In conclusion, Ambassador Varma, I want to come back to the idea of the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. In that context, are we looking at high-level visits to or from New Delhi, especially the date and venue of the next India-Russia annual bilateral summit? And also, how do you see the prospects for a informal summit between the two leaders of India and Russia, similar to the May 2018 summit held at Sochi in Russia?
Well, as you are aware, Prime Minister has already extended an invitation for President Putin to visit India. Originally, the visit was to have been held this month in terms of a regular schedule, but the regular schedules of all leaders have been set aside because of the COVID pandemic. When the two leaders spoke to each other, they have indicated that the summit stands. There will be a visit by President Putin to India for the bilateral summit, but the dates for which will be fixed separately. So we look forward to the visit of President Putin to India for the bilateral summit. He's already visited India 8 times, which is in itself quite a record for world leaders. But that is not surprising at all, given the extraordinary support and importance that President Putin has attached to relations with India. Prime Minister Modi enjoys an extraordinary personal rapport with world leaders, among them with President Putin. It has now become a tradition in India-Russia relations for the two leaders to have a conversation between themselves on bilateral issues, regional issues, on global issues. This happened in Sochi. This happened in Vladivostok. And I will not be surprised at all if Prime Minister Modi invites President Putin and they have a conversation of the nature that they had in Sochi. I would say that India-Russia relations are poised for further growth in the decades to come. They have the strength of an old banyan tree, which has very deep roots, but an old banyan tree also constantly sprouts new branches. Diversification of a strategic partnership, strengthening of the traditional pillars on defense, energy, nuclear, and space, into regional cooperation, into scientific cooperation, into cooperation involving our youth. Prime Minister Modi has paid particular attention to this aspect. He visited Sochi to visit gifted students at the Sirius Center. We've established a relationship of cooperation with the Atal Innovation Mission, where extraordinarily talented students from the Indian side have to come together on 2 occasions. And on both these occasions, the talent pool that both on the Russian side and the Indian side was considered to be quite extraordinary. So these are the new bridges to the future. The new bridges to the future is commonality of our interests, the solidarity that we show to each other at the times of difficulties, the commitment by our leaders, and the extraordinary positive sentiment that exists at the level of the people, both in India and in Russia. With all these coming together, we are very confident that as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of our strategic partnership, we can look forward to the next 20 years with great hope, with great confidence for the success and of our bilateral relations.
Indeed. On that note, Ambassador Varma, thank you so much for making time to be with us on DD India. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramachandran. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Welcome, Ambassador. And that's a wrap, but news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.